Your future is tied to who you surround yourself with in the present. Let me say that again. Your future, my future, it's tied to who you surround yourself with in the present. Even if you read secular language, you will become like the people you spend the most time with. So your future is tied to who you surround yourself with in the present. That's why our team under Lindsay's leadership and a lot of other people, we've created over 40 different environments for you to step into because we think it will increase the likelihood of you thriving in your life and in your faith. And there's over 40 of those. And we talk all the time here at Epic about front-end pain versus back-end pain. It's a great thing to use at your companies. We use it a lot inside our household. Let me give you one example, and then I'll tell you how it applies to groups here at Epic. Front-end pain for me is an annual physical exam. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Are there 5 of us that get a physical every year? People better get after it. No, I've got to be honest. The only reason I get physicals every year because the first year when we moved here to launch the church, my wife told me she wouldn't come to our first service at Epic until I got a physical. I've been going back ever since, okay? Don't want to lose a member of the church or a member of my marriage since there's only 2 of us. But front-end pain is me going and having a physical exam every single year. And it's front-end pain because it takes time for me. You have to go for the appointment, and then you have to go to, at least for me, you have to go on a different day to have lab work done. And once you cross 40, let's just say it gets a little more vulnerable. I know some of you over 50 are like, Ben, just wait. Just wait. Mel's over 50. So it's a little bit like, this is front-end pain. Yeah, I could tell you all about our church, but I'd rather do it when I'm fully dressed. Is that okay? Can we do that? And then you have to come back another day, and the day that you come back for all the lab work, you have to fast until you show up, and you're like, but Ben, you're a pastor. Listen, I do fast from time to time, but I like breakfast, okay? And so I'm like, we're going at 8 o'clock. We're going to show up early. Maybe they'll be there. You got urine sample, blood sample, all this stuff. That's front-end pain. Back-end pain, though, would be me being diagnosed with something when it's way too late. Does that make sense? Front-end pain, think about every area of your life. Back-end pain. When it comes to community life here at Epic, front-end pain is you signing up for a group today and showing up in a few weeks unsure how it's going to go. Back-end pain will be you getting to the last week of October and regretting that you don't have any friends because you chose work over it, because you chose fear over it, because you chose isolation over being a part of a group. And you guys, listen, you are coming into our church at the right time. We have more offerings than should even be allowed. Can I just say that? We have over 40 groups. Lindsay added 3 groups this week. She's still not getting a bonus, but she added 3 groups just this week. I mean, there's something for you. I won't hit everybody, but let me just tell you what we have. We have a group that just got signed up for Marin County. So all of you watching online, because you don't want to come over the bridge, we've got a group for you. We've got a moms group on Tuesdays. We've got 2 newly married groups. We have a preparing to be married group that's going to be awesome. We have a group for college students. We have several groups for young professionals. We have a group for financial wisdom. We have a couple of faith and work groups. We have a group that meets in a brewery. If you're living a part of the country and you're watching online right now where that's not allowed at your church, move to San Francisco because we have a small group that meets in a brewery. We have groups that meet at lunchtime. We have prayer groups that meet morning, lunch, or the evening. We have a spiritual disciplines group. We have a group for married couples, and you don't have to be newly married. You can just be a married couple. We have groups for women. We have a group for men. We have a group for hiking. We have so many things for you to position yourself, but we can't do everything for you. We've done all we can. Now it's time for you. Front-end pain. Sign up today. There's no reason for you not to be in one of our groups if you're around here. There's no reason for that. Some of you might say, Ben, I do want to surround myself with the right kind of people. I'm just unsure about the faith in God thing. Let me give you 2 thoughts on that. You've already heard one of them, and I'll reiterate it. The first one is this. You can belong here before you believe. You absolutely can belong here before you believe. I've got a friend in our church. He was here like day 1. He's still not a Christian. He's still very much in our church. I'm like, one day I'm going to preach a great message, and he's going to come forward. Heavens are going to open up. The CVS is going to fall because that's what's above us. And I know he's going to come to faith in Jesus. He just can't get to the resurrection thing, and he may even be in the room right now, but you can belong here. without any kind of pressure to explore. And Alpha, as Lindsay mentioned, is a great thing. New to faith, seeking. You want to know what Christianity is all about. You're coming back to your faith. Or some people have signed up because they just kind of got on the journey of Christianity without understanding kind of the foundational stuff. So all of those reasons make it available. But for today, what I want to do is, yes, tell you that your future's tied to what you do and who you surround yourself with in the present. I want to give you the 7th part of the Paradox series. We're going 9 weeks, okay? And then we're doing a Bring It Out series on the 15th. The paradox I want to cover today, I think could be a game changer for every single one of us, and I include myself. I don't just mean all of you and except for the guy on the stage. We're going to talk about the paradox of freedom today. Freedom. I know that you want freedom. I'm not sure you want the right kind of freedom. I know you have a grasp on how freedom works. I'm not sure you understand in God's economy how he intends for freedom to work. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I mean, can we just be honest? Like, we don't like church answers around here just for being churchy, but when we think about words like religion or God or commandments or Lord or the Bible, we tend to think that all of those words equal a loss of freedom. Would you agree? Can we just be honest about that and not have our church face on, like just a real face? We lose freedom. A lot of people, even in this room maybe, or watching online, you've never stepped into this relationship of following Jesus because you know as soon as you do, you lose all of your freedom, at least the freedom that you want. So what I want to do today is set up the framework for the paradox of freedom by giving you a question, and then we'll move into our teaching time. I'll tell you where that's going to be in just a second. Here's the question. I really want you to think about it, and it's where we're going all day long. Could it be possible that what seems to restrict us actually liberates us? Paradoxical language, if you're following from the series. Remember, a paradox is a seemingly self-contradictory statement that's actually true. So there's the question, going to frame up this idea of paradox of freedom. Could it be possible that what seems to restrict you could actually liberate you? Could it be possible that what seems to bring me into bondage and kind of close me off from the thing I want could actually be the thing that expands my freedom? If so, that would be paradoxical. Would you agree? Because we tend to think that whatever restricts us crowds out our freedom in life. Our text for today is found in John chapter 8. If you have a Bible, you can go there. If you've got the Epic Church app, I encourage you to get it if you don't, because everything we do is there. Like, again, kind of like our groups, we do everything for you. All you have to do is step in. Our team has put all of my notes and the scriptures into our app. All you have to do is download it and bring it up and refresh it. I'm going to ask you to stand with me as we read John chapter 8, verse 31 through 36. Here's what we're walking into. It's Jesus teaching about the paradox of freedom to a group of Jewish followers. You're going to hear something in this text that even if you're not a person of faith, you've heard before. In fact, a lot of colleges and universities have one of the things you're going to hear inscribed on many of their buildings, and not just Christian universities, secular ones as well, and you'll know it when we get there. You can say aha if you want to, that's fine. Verse 31 of chapter 8. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples." Here's the one you've seen before, anybody? "Then you will know the truth, and the truth..." It sounds like you guys are set free. Sounds like you need to be set free. They answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?" Jesus replied, "Very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." You may be seated. I see a few of your faces that have been on vacation the last 2 weeks, some of your faces that have been in Hawaii for the last 6 weeks. I'm sorry that you're back at church, but let's make the most of it. All right? I'm looking at you. Yeah. Some people have been to Thailand, got a house in Hawaii, whatever. This is where you belong. It's always like this Sunday where everybody comes back, and I'm just noticing all of you. You're not escaping my sight today. Here's the question I want to lead out with. What kind of freedom are you after? What kind of freedom? You're after freedom, so I want to just ask you, what kind of freedom are you after? Today will be a good one to take some notes or maybe screenshot what you're going to see. Again, all that stuff's in the app, so you can screenshot it there, save it, I think even. But I want to talk to you about 2 kinds of freedom. And I want you to understand what both kinds of freedom involve, and I want you to understand really clearly how they're different from each other. And the difference will change the game of life and I think your faith in God today. It really does have that kind of power. So the first kind of freedom is the kind of freedom we typically think about when we hear the word freedom. Here's a straightforward definition you'll see on the screen. Freedom, the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. That's the kind of freedom we're used to, right? The power or right to act, speak, or think as we want to without anyone hindering us or without anything restraining us. This is the kind of freedom we think about. Do whatever you want. Don't answer to anyone. Live your life without limits. But let me ask you a question. Does this kind of freedom actually work? I mean, the theory is amazing, right? Who wants limits? Nobody. The theory is awesome, but I'm just not sure if it works. In his book, Making Sense of God, author Tim Keller out of New York, who pastored Redeemer Presbyterian Church there for a long time, he writes in his book, Making Sense of God, about an illustration. He just hypothetically throws out, imagine there's a 60-year-old man, and this 60-year-old man wants to eat food that's not great for him. I don't know how that is at 60. I know how it is at 42. He wants to eat food that's not great for him. He also just had a granddaughter who was born, and he wants to be close to her through her growing up years. This man goes to the doctor. The doctor says, sir, looking at all your reports, if you don't change your diet, you're going to have a heart attack and die. I want to ask you two questions about this man. Does this man have the freedom to keep eating whatever he wants to? Does this man have the freedom to be close to his granddaughter as she grows up? You know what this man doesn't have? The right to enjoy both freedoms. You with me? This is good. Two kinds of freedom. Yes, he has the freedom to do what he wants, but he cannot do what he wants and get the second kind of freedom. He cannot keep eating the stuff that he's eating and be able to watch his granddaughter grow up. He will have to do what we all have to do, which is decide which one we want to embrace and which one we want to restrict. Let me ask you a question as we think about two kinds of freedom. Who has more freedom? The man who's been with 100 different women over the last 20 years, or the man who's been with the same woman faithfully over the last 20 years? I'm waiting for the light bulb to go on. There are two kinds of freedom. Are you with me? Don't answer it if you're married. Don't answer it wrongly if you're married. Shauna, I know what the answer is, at least for 18 and a half years. I can't speak for 20. When you take a job, you lose your freedom. Would you agree? Raise your hand like slightly if you all know that. It should be 100% of us. When you take a job, you lose your freedom. Raise it high if you're in the midst of a job where you've really lost your freedom. Right? Just looking. We're hiring in the season at Epic Church, and we just need to know because we're just all freedom here. You don't have to do anything. No, we take jobs and we lose our freedom. Sean and I were hanging out Thursday night with a couple of other couples, and one of the guys was talking about how he's just started a season of fun employment. His word, not mine. He just started a season of fun employment. And he said to the rest of us, I think I can get used to this. But when I saw his wife's face, I'm like, she cannot. She's not used to it at all. And what he meant when he said, I think I can get used to this, he meant that I think I can get used to the freedom I'm enjoying. I'm seeing my kids more. I'm doing what I want. I can finish my workout whenever I want. Like I can do all the things that I want to do. And if he takes a new job, he will lose some freedom. Would you agree? But he will gain a paycheck that will lead to other kinds of freedoms. Are you tracking with me? This is how life always works. If you become a committed part of this Epic Church community, you will lose some freedoms. You will lose the freedom to remain anonymous. You will lose the freedom to live a self-absorbed life because we won't let you. You will lose the freedom to bounce from church to church to church every Sunday after every Sunday after every Sunday. But we think, will gain some amazing freedoms by being an intricately, deeply attached part of this community. Does that make sense? Here's the way true freedom works, and I want you to get it. True freedom means you lose one thing to gain something else. Some of you need to take a picture of that. I know you're like, Ben, I'm going to remember it. You will not. By lunch, you're going to forget. True freedom means you lose something to gain something else. That's how it always works. When I put something in on my calendar, I lose the freedom of that hour. Does that make sense? Everybody know that? Right? But it's okay if I'm engaging in something that brings a different kind of freedom. Now imagine I receive a phone call from a guy and he tells me, there's a guy I'm in a relationship with, he's a mentor in my life. Imagine he tells me, Ben, I need 3 hours of your time on Saturday. The questions you asked me, I have some wisdom to give you. I also want to glean some wisdom from you on a couple of things. And by the way, before we leave, remind me, I've got a book with me, and this book has all kinds of vacation destinations around the world. And before we leave our breakfast, I want you to choose one, and I'll cover 7 days for your family, wherever you choose out of this booklet. Now imagine if I say to him, sir, thank you for the invitation, but I'm really embracing freedom these days, and I need to keep those 3 hours free. Would you think I was crazy? Would you say, Ben, I will take those 3 hours? Anybody, right? It would be crazy, right? If I said, in the name of freedom, I don't want to commit myself to spending time with this guy who's trying to bring me into something amazing for my family. Jesus says to those Jewish followers, you could be set free, and they're like, us? We're free. Now, what's interesting, if you know anything about Jewish history from the Bible, certainly the Old Testament, Hebrew scriptures, or just history itself, they said, we're descendants of Abraham. We've never been slaves. What about those 400 years in Egypt under Pharaoh's reign and rule, right? But Jesus is saying this, you think you're free, but you're not free. You're the first kind of freedom, but you're not embracing the second kind of freedom. If you know the truth will set you free. Listen to this word from Tim Keller in The Reason for God. Keller has written a lot about this idea, and so I'll quote him a couple of times because he's really been helpful to me personally. He says, in many areas of life, freedom is not so much the absence of restrictions as finding the right ones. Here's the phrase, the liberating restrictions. You need to write that phrase down because you need to be thinking to yourself, I can't have ultimate freedom in the way I've been thinking about freedom. What are the liberating restrictions, right? What am I going to do to my body so that I get the freedom of being as healthy as I want to be? What am I going to do to my time? What am I going to restrict it so that I get in on the things that I actually want to get in on? If you become a follower of Jesus, you won't be able to do what you want to do. Does that make sense, period? And let me just give a side word, not the point of the message. I hear so many people talking about being Christians or followers of Jesus. This is going to sound elementary and obvious, but you know that if you are a follower of Jesus, you actually have to follow Jesus. Everybody knows that, right? It's like, no, I'm such a follower of Jesus. I'm like, but Jesus is going over there, and you're going over here. Help me understand. And I'm not talking about perfection, but just this idea. And so Jesus says to them, he doesn't just say, I want to set you free, go do whatever you want. He says what? It's right there in the text. If you hold to my teaching, if you restrict yourself to what I say you can do and you do it, if you restrict yourself to what I say you cannot do and you don't do it, if you hold to my teachings, then you're my disciples. And if you're my disciples, truth sets you free. Mic drop. It sounds so restrictive. We think God's commands for our lives are to limit our freedom. God thinks his commands for our lives are to bring us into freedom. You tell me which one you want to believe. And the world is selling the freedom message to us strong with path one. Would you agree? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're young, old, whatever the case you think, Ben, I'm just in between. All right, you're in between. It is selling you the freedom message, and it just doesn't hold up. It just doesn't hold up. Now, if I mention the word master to you, for obvious reasons, every one of us will begin to think of slavery. So I want to talk to you about, not slavery, but I want to talk to you about Jesus' concept of master in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. No one can serve two masters. To which you want to reply, Ben, I live in America, in San Francisco in 2019. You don't have to worry about me having two masters. I don't even have one. You do. We all do. The reason our vision statement is to orient our entire lives around Jesus here at Epic is because your life and my life will always orient around something. And whatever it orients around, that's the master. So years ago, we introduced this concept called the master principle right here at Epic, because whatever is your master, when push comes to shove, the master always wins. Always wins. I like my family and I like working crazy hours. Push comes to shove, one always wins. Let me tell you, your master could be 100 different things. It could be pleasure. It could be fear. It could be the approval of others. It could be your job. It could be wealth accumulation. Your master could actually be your kid. As crazy as that sounds, it's true. Your master could be a whole lot of things, and so I want you to think about what it is, but whatever or whoever your master is, it dictates and controls every aspect of your life, right? So if it's getting into college, that becomes your master. It controls everything else. If it's pleasure, it controls everything else. If it's wealth accumulation, it controls everything else. Whatever it is, everything else answers to it. And the paradox for today, when it comes to the master freedom idea, is this: Jesus is the only master that brings ultimate freedom. The reason it's a paradox is because you wouldn't think having a Lord that you follow would give you freedom, but that's the whole point of the paradox of freedom. You with me? So he says to them, if you will do what I say, you will have freedom. And they respond like, Jesus, we don't need to be free because we're not slaves. And he's like, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Other writings in the scripture would say, whoever sins will be mastered by sin. You're mastered by something. And whatever or whoever your master is, it dictates the rest of your life. We make good excuses for why we do what we do, but the reason why we do so much of what we do is because of the master that occupies a central place in our life or is on the throne of our lives. It's true for all of us. James 1:25, this is the half-brother of Jesus. Here's what he says. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. It's interesting. He said, whoever looks into the law that brings freedom. We tend to think that laws bring the opposite of freedom. Would you agree? Laws tell us what we cannot do. Anybody try to get a permit recently for your business or home and you're like, Ben, I'm pretty sure the laws are restricting my freedom. Laws are, we think of them. But what if a law is meant to bring us freedom? That's the whole idea of what James is writing about when it comes to the scriptures, the word of God. Yes, God commands us for our freedom. Think about the Garden of Eden. God in the garden with Adam and Eve, does God place restrictions on this couple? I'm going to help you guys out. He does. He says, you can have all of this freedom, but I'm going to restrict this one tree. And the reason God placed restrictions on them is the reason he places restrictions on us. He's for our freedom. He's not restricting us to lose freedom. He's restricting us so we can gain our freedom. But Satan, in the person of the serpent, comes and says to them, listen, guys, God is holding out on you and your freedom. He knows that if you eat from the one tree he restricted you, your eyes will be open and you'll be just like God. Ultimate freedom. That's what was promised to Adam and Eve. But did it bring them ultimate freedom? Here's the statement out of Adam and Eve, and it's true for us too. It is possible for us to be enslaved by what promised to free us. Every one of you needs to examine this for your own life. It is possible for us to be enslaved by what promised to free us. Where in your life have you bought the lie that Adam and Eve bought, that God's holding out on you, so you're going to take things into your own hands, into your own life, into your own body, into your own mind, your own actions, and you're going to do it because you're going to gain freedom? There could be a lot of options for you to choose. I want to choose two that are super prominent in our world. And that means, by the way, it's not just super prominent out there, it's super prominent in here. The first one is this: wealth accumulation. There is nothing wrong in and of itself with wealth accumulation, but it is the worst master. If you've ever been mastered by it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're like, if I get X amount of dollars, I can stay in San Francisco. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But then you're like, if I have X amount of dollars, I will have ultimate freedom. And so you go after it. But if it becomes the master, then you don't get it. It gets you. And it has you. And it traps you. And I can point you to person after person after person, including this guy who thought, hypothetically, if I could just get this, then everything else will bring me crazy freedom and I don't have to worry about a thing. We know people who've been down that road. Anybody know people? You can raise your hand like, yeah, Ben, I have a friend. I know you're talking about yourself, but yeah, I've got a friend. Let me tell you the second one that's prominent, especially in our world today: sexual fulfillment. It promises freedom like nothing else. Agreed? Anybody, anytime, anywhere. And then it promises us with these three words. And if you don't say it, I know you're being churchy, but I know you know the truth. No strings, freedom. But I wish you could be in meetings that our pastoral team has. I wish you could be in those meetings when they, going for ultimate freedom, now have found themselves in bondage. But you know, it's not just for people who I've had meetings with. It's for some of you in this room. Now, don't do that awkward thing where you write me an email and say, hey, Ben, when you talked about sexual fulfillment, you looked at me. Listen, I've only got a couple ways to look. I can turn around and make everybody feel comfortable. But listen, if the Holy Spirit's using my eyes to convict you, I'm going to leave that to the two of you. I think nothing in our world today than those two things, but your thing could be 100 other things. Like, what is it that promises you freedom? And the worst thing isn't just that it doesn't deliver, but it enslaves. It puts you in bondage. It traps you. It gets you in its grip, and then it becomes your master, and that master that promised freedom doesn't deliver it. And I could introduce you to person after person if they were willing to share their story. I could tell you about my own life where I'm trying to do things because I think I'm going to get the most freedom, and it is the stuff that enslaved me, and I know it has enslaved you, and some of you, you're in the enslavement right now. Here's what you have to know, and I think you do know this. You can shake your head if you know it. If you don't shake your head, it's still true. A good parent places restrictions on their kids. Just checking the room. A good boss places restrictions on their employees. A good athlete places restrictions on their bodies. A pastor who wants to give a great talk on Sunday places restrictions on his Saturday. That's why I keep declining your invitation. And a good God places restrictions on the children that he loves. Not to take away their freedom, to give them freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says this, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is. See, so many of you have been buying the lie that where the Lord is, there is the absence of freedom. So many of you have been buying the lie that this first kind of freedom is what you're after, so you've rejected the offer of Jesus because you thought he would restrict you, but no, he's going to open up something for you better than you could ever imagine. People want to debate this huge theological argument around, do we get free choice or is God taking care of that for us? Let me tell you this, wherever you fall on that spectrum, God gives you all kind of choice, but understand this, when you make your choices, you will live with your choices. And the Proverbs say, especially about sexual temptation and even wealth, it promises you one thing, but in the end, it's bitter. It promises you life, but in the end, it's death. What is the freedom that you're after, and where is it going to lead to in the end? Here's a quote from Keller, Making Sense of God. I want you to check it out. Christianity, he says, is the only religion that claims God gave up his freedom so we could experience the ultimate freedom from evil and death itself. Therefore, you can trust him. He sacrificed his independence for you, so you can sacrifice yours for him. And when you do, you will find that is the ultimate, infinitely liberating constraint. We've never thought about God restricting himself, right? Because we think he's God. Do you know that when God chose to enter into a covenant with us, he restricted himself? Do you know when God decided that he would always be faithful, he restricted himself? The scriptures say even if you and I are faithless, hand up, God will be faithful. Do you know that he's committed himself to that? The scriptures say Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, which means what? He's restricted himself. He cannot be unfaithful. He cannot be untrue to his character. He has limited himself, and we're like, oh, I've got to have ultimate freedom. God wants you to have ultimate freedom, but chances are what you think about freedom is maybe exactly the opposite of how freedom actually works. I've got one thing I want to say, and I'll leave you with this question. Here it is. God is for your freedom. Are you? I want you to meditate on this for a moment. God is for your freedom. Ninth grader in the room, God is for your freedom. Person whose husband left him in the room, God is for your freedom. Person who's trapped in some addiction right now, God is for your freedom. The person who thinks they have a past that they could never be freed from and that their past has to dictate their future, God is for your freedom. The person who's been in bondage, so whatever the thing is, and it could be a myriad of things, God is for your freedom. But the choice is yours. Are you for your freedom? Your future's tied to which freedom path you take. The future of your kids, the future of our church as a healthy community, tied to what we believe about how freedom actually works. And with all of my heart, I beg you to go over this, listen to it, sink into the scriptures, not because I have anything amazing to say, but Jesus is trying to show you, here's the paradox of freedom. But if you want to be in bondage, go be in bondage. Do you remember when the Jews were enslaved in Egypt and then they were freed? Do you remember what they wanted to do as they were journeying towards freedom? Do you remember what they wanted to do? Let us go back. And every one of us says, how could they? How could you? How could I? God is for my freedom. Will I be for my freedom? God is for your freedom. Will you be for your freedom? Today needs to be a day for some of you to step across the line of faith in Jesus. You've been so afraid of losing your freedom. Today you've been hearing that it's declared you will find a freedom unlike you've ever known by stepping into being a follower of Jesus, not keeping yourself away from it. So maybe today would be your day. You could let us know that in just a moment. I want to pray for you. The rest of us, maybe we were freed from our sin by Jesus, but we keep stepping into something and we keep making something a master in our life that's always going to lead to enslavement, not lead to freedom. What do we need to repent of and move away from and move towards? I believe over half of us in this room need to move off path one of freedom and move on to path two. Your future's at stake. It's your choice. We'll help you. We'll give you resources. We'll help cover counseling costs. We're providing over 40 environments for you to experience freedom amongst the community, but we can't do every choice for you. That rests in your hands. Let me pray for you. Let's go ahead and drop those lights. And I do want to ask if there's anyone in the room today who would just say, I think we've got to give this opportunity, this invitation. Is there anyone here in this room today who would say, Ben, for the first time in my life, I want to experience the freedom that Jesus brings. I've gone the other route. I want to experience his freedom by trusting him and giving my life to him. If that's you, would you raise your hands just so I could pray for you? Incredible. Please make sure you let us know by way of filling something out online or the card. See us in the lobby. Write us an email. Just ben@epicsf.com would be great. And then how many of us in this room, you don't have to name your theme. We've all struggled with this. How many of us in this room realize that you've actually become enslaved to something that promised to free you? Is there anybody who just wants that freedom today? Just get those hands up high. I'm with you in that. I can fall trapped to it. I can believe that if my church grows, I'll have this freedom. If my kids reach a certain age, I'll have this freedom. And the reality is it enslaves us. God, I pray for the people who are stepping into this relationship with you for the first time, that they would experience your love, the love that frees us. God, you know the message we've been handed by this world. It gets so confusing. So be the loud and clear voice in our life on freedom. God, for people in this room who are right now enslaved by something that they thought would bring freedom, God, show them that they're not without hope, that you can rescue them from wherever they are today, God. There is no place they could go that's too far from your love. God, there's nothing they could do that would keep you from dying for them because, Jesus, you already did. And so we want to celebrate your freedom. God, would you make this a community of freedom? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. So Spirit, come. Do something, even in the time we have remaining in this room, that will change how we live our lives in your freedom. It's in Jesus' great name we pray. Amen. I want to ask you to stand. You guys, our future is at stake. The future of your freedom is available, but it will be contingent upon what path of freedom you choose. Seth's going to lead us in a great song. And we're going to declare our freedom. And if you want in on the freedom, I want to hear you sing it like you mean it. Lead us in this great tune.